Welcome to the Unapologetic MidLife Podcast. I'm your host, Mindi Lobuzzetta, and I am here today with Michael Ayala-White.
Mhm.
So, Michael, we're just going to dive right in. That's how I like to do this.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on as a guest. I really appreciate it.
You're
So
welcome.
I am a trauma-informed certified coach. I work with men all across the country who find themselves in some very difficult situations, typically with addiction, and helping them to see really three things. Where are they? How did they get there? And what does a path of recovery look like moving forward? Also, some other certifications for some inner child work, some somatic or body work, and some attachment stuff as well, just to make sure that I am up to date with my certifications and learning and growing in my own story and in my ability to work with guys around the country.
Awesome. So, typically you work with only men.
Yep.
Okay. Just to clarify. So you guys who are listening, or ladies, if you have a guy in your life who
Mhm.
could benefit. So let's talk a little bit about what it means to be a coach. And you have mentioned certifications, right? I know there's lots of different kinds of credentials that, you kind of hear tossed around. Some people are familiar with things, some are not. What does that look like?
Yeah. So a trauma-informed certified coach, at least the way that I did it, was I went through what's called the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. It's kind of the
Okay.
umbrella to make sure that, as we talked about off air, I'm not just taking a 1-hour seminar and saying I am now an expert in this particular field. It was much
Yeah.
more extensive than that.
Good.
To make sure that we're following the ethical and practical guidelines. So coaching differs from therapy in the fact that while I don't diagnose, right, and technically treat trauma, there are
Mhm.
certain modalities and certain certifications within coaching
Mhm.
that can allow you to step into that coach mindset and work with someone in their story.
Mhm.
I have a certification in some inner child work and some story work as well to figure out, how did you get here? And while
Mhm.
I'm not trained in EMDR or brain spotting yet, and I
Mhm.
refer out for those specific things, there are certain somatic practices or body practices and breath work that we can do to kind of figure out ways to regulate something that is typically activating for them and going, okay, let's hold some space for that.
Mhm.
Let's see what it looks like to step into learning some practices and learning not only how you got here, but how it's affecting you currently. And then
Yeah.
what does it look like to release some of that in your story in
Yeah.
ways that borders therapy, but are not quite therapy as well. And so
Yeah.
for a lot of guys, also helping them to learn language in terms of the
Mhm.
mental health field. Emotional intelligence is a huge one.
Mhm.
Guys don't know typically how to bring their inside world out. They've got
Okay.
a lot going on in here and they don't have a lot of language or practice on how to actually talk with other men about what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. And so we do a lot of that in one-on-one and then some group work as well to try to grow their language and their experience in that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the group work. I think connection is a big part of healing, and through connecting with other people, whether they have a similar story or even just some sort of difficulty or something that they're sharing on what that journey looks like, it's a big part of this. So
Mhm.
I'm glad that you do some group work.
Yeah.
I think that that's great.
Yeah, group work for me is where the magic happens. I think the ability for men to have a safe place to fail
Hmm.
is so important.
Yeah.
The ability to also experience things in the group where someone says something and something happens inside of you and you're like, I didn't like that, or I really did like that.
Yeah.
And I've never heard that before and that's resonating with me. Or here's what comes up when you say it in that type of way.
Hmm.
It's really a space to learn, who am I? How do I respond in certain situations? And then how do I want to show up with my spouse, with my kids, as an employer, as an employee, just as a human walking through the world, trying to become the
Hmm.
best version of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that you touched base on failure, because
Hmm.
a lot of times people hear that word and they think, you know, it's the worst thing ever, right?
Hmm.
Failure. But it truly is through failure that we learn. If
Hmm.
we got it right all the time, I don't think we'd be learning.
No.
So let's touch base a little bit on failure and how that's kind of approached in
Yeah,
your setting.
so it's a great question. For men, the realm of failure can be very complex because there's typically a lot of shame messages attached to it. Some of them were told to them, some of them were kind of caught in the environment that they were in of this is what it means to be a man of this family.
Mhm.
Whether that was told to them by their father, a lack of a father figure, by their mother, whoever. And a lot of that shame at a very young age gets internalized. And so in many ways, there, at least for the guys that I work with in addiction, there's kind of a extreme on both sides where there's either this really performance-based shame where they are trying to outperform the shame they feel.
Mhm.
So they're always working, they're always striving, in a way where they can never find real rest and nothing's
Right.
ever enough.
Nothing's ever enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Or there's this kind of lower end sneaky shame of self-loathing, and in performance, nothing is ever enough. And in the loathing, I am not enough and I will never
Mm,
be enough. And so there's this interesting kind of counterbalance where somewhere in the middle is like healthy shame of acknowledging our strengths and weaknesses, kind of where we start and stop, where our
mhm,
gifts start and stop, and just owning that and owning who we are.
mhm.
Those
Yeah.
shame messages can force men into typically one of the two extremes. And what that does is it doesn't build in room for failure. If
Yeah.
there's performance based shame, there's no room for failure because
Yeah.
I have to outperform my shame. Or if there is that self loathing shame, I can't risk failure because it will
Mhm.
confirm that I am in fact not enough.
Oof. Yeah.
And so what it does is it keeps men pigeonholed in these really interesting contradictory beliefs. And the thing that kind of brings them out of that in the actual practical ways of life is typically addiction. That's the thing that they find that helps to regulate their shame, along with some other things. That
Escape.
it either brings them up out of shame and lets them feel something, or if the anxiety and the fear of failing is so high, they
Mhm.
need something to come down from that. And the release of addiction, whatever that may be,
Mhm.
typically kind of down regulates them back into some form of middle ground. And so
Yeah.
the ability to have a safe space to fail and to be received in your failure well by
Mhm.
other men is so important. And there's layers to that, as I know that you know, in terms of
Yeah.
the physical response of shame setting in and someone not running away, mental messages that can be picked up in a group environment when someone says like, dude, I still love you regardless of what has
Mm.
happened.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know how to receive that sometimes. The emotional experience of someone co-regulating you in that time when your shame is telling you to take off or shut down. And then for those that have a spiritual side as well, like what does that mean to walk in a healthy way in the world?
Yeah.
So a safe place to fail for anybody, but in my field for men is so important. And a lot of
Yeah.
them don't know how important it is until they get into an environment where they start to experience it.
Yeah. Yeah. That support while you're failing at things, right? Because I don't think, especially with healing, a lot of times, people think that this is like, okay, I've healed.
Hmm.
No, this doesn't work this way. There's not this destination you reach and you're done. Healing is this lifelong journey that you go on. And some days are going to be better than others. Some days you're going to do great at working through your growth. And some days you're going to really struggle with it.
100%. 100%. And for me, in my own story of
Yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah, my own story of not having the language and the framework of trauma. Really, my life coming to a head in 2019, where my life just kind of exploded from secret addiction and kind of living a double life. Then started to get some of this language over the next 2 or 3 years. I stumbled around looking for decent help, and then came upon a few different places that helped to give me this kind of trauma informed therapy and care,
Hmm.
along with a holistic form, like physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, or mind, body, soul,
Hmm.
depending on how I want to say it.
Embodiment. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then really like embodied living, stepping into that framework was huge for me. And the ability to see the difference between having to hide and
Hmm.
have to embrace my own good days and bad days and my own
Hmm.
ability to own my failure and to be received well and going, let's call each other up to more. We
Hmm.
don't need to sit here and berate each other, but it's like, hey, let's dust ourselves off and keep going. My ability to kind of work recovery and then step into what I do now is mostly because I let go of the destination of I need to be healed, embrace the journey of healing, the
Hmm.
ability to kind of go, hey, today's a really good day. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
Hey, today's a really tough day. And that's all it is it's just a tough day. And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that tomorrow will be that way as well. But for a lot of guys, especially in addiction, it's all or nothing, very
Hmm.
black.
Very black and white. Yep.
And
Yep.
so the ability to kind of shift into the both and, where it's like it can be a really hard day and I can still come a long way.
Mm.
Both those things can be true.
Yep.
And that frees us up to be in the present. For a lot of guys as well, at least the guys that I work with, one of the 6 things that I see in every single guy, one of them is shame, but a lot of the guys have trauma. And
Hmm.
there are levels to where it's like, hey, I will work with you, but we have to expand your level of care. You need to go get some EMDR, some brain spotting,
Hmm.
something that I can't do. But what we can do is expand your view from either or to both and, so that you're either not afraid of the future
Yep.
or you're not stuck in the past. because the ability to actually be present with who you are in reality is very difficult for guys with addiction. And the addiction helps them to escape reality or to cope with reality because
Mm-hmm.
they haven't been able to process whatever has happened or is happening.
Yeah.
So letting go of that destination, it's like I need to get somewhere and lean into and becoming someone. And that journey never stops. There's a
Yeah.
lot of freedom in that.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned, your breaking point. Breaking points are going to vary depending on the person. Do you mind sharing a little more about that? So your breaking point was before COVID, which is good. But what did that look like for you?
Yeah. COVID was such an interesting time for me,
Yeah.
also in New York State as well. Each state
Mm-hmm.
had a form of regulations, and ours to protect and other things was stricter for
Mm-hmm.
a while.
Mm-hmm.
What it did was I started to find some decent help a month before COVID happened. And so it
Wow.
launched me into this journey that when everything shut down, I just became a bookworm and a podcast guy of just consuming all this stuff where I
Yeah.
was, this is actually good for me. Like
I don't mind this. Yeah, like I'm finding myself having maybe time to do some of this research and learn about myself or learn about healing.
yes, 100%. And so I'm more extroverted by nature, but it
Okay.
was a season for me where I almost became a hermit of really kind of trying to figure out, okay, what is going on in me? And so for me, the breaking point of my internal world, along with my story of
Mm-hmm.
in my own upbringing of lots of physical, emotional, and then sexual abuse, not having any language to process any of that, and
Mm-hmm.
so I become an adult, kind of step into some nonprofit and some faith work, and as I start to rise in that, my inner world and stress levels rise, and I'm starting to develop addictions.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the foresight or the framework to see how they correlate. The more influence that I get, the more my internal world is a mess, the more I'm reaching for something or some things to regulate.
Mm-hmm.
And so that comes to a head in 2019, and I am lost, losing my career, a lot of relationships, this kind of interesting
Friendships.
friendships,
Yep.
eventually, unfortunately, like my marriage and really
Okay.
kind of wrestling that out. I didn't understand the concept at the time, and I heard someone talk about this where the concept of displacement for those who are in refugee or asylum status, how they become a person without a place,
Mm-hmm.
what happens to them internally.
When
Well,
there's no home,
there's
there's
no
no
home.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
nowhere to drop roots. There's nowhere to attach to. I was experiencing that, not on the same level, but in my own life of kind of losing and becoming a person without a place.
So you got divorced during COVID.
End of 2022.
Okay,
So as
good.
we're kind
Kind
of,
of COVID time. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so, the reality for me was becoming a person without a place, and the disorientation of
Mm-hmm.
that, of kind of going, where do I go? How do I find a people group to be a part of? Because regardless of what any of us believe, we are at minimum a herd species. We need
Yeah. We
community.
need each other. We haven't survived hundreds of years
Yeah.
without each other.
Yes. And so in that time, there was a lot of learning done. And there was a lot of reading and understanding and processing my own story of, okay, I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to make sense of how I got here. How do I get out? And
Mm-hmm.
that was the next level for me of care, was learning embodied living, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this insight's great. Super great for all this. What do I do with how that's where.
What do I do with this now that I've learned it? Yeah.
So the next level of care for me was really stepping into and learning embodied living of what does it
Mm-hmm.
mean to actually get to know my body, myself? How
Yeah.
do I experience the world on a daily basis? What does that look like? What does it mean to step into something greater than myself in both
Yeah.
community and in faith? Like all of that.
Purpose. Yeah.
Purpose. Yeah, attach myself to purpose, which is huge for guys in addiction. A lot of guys have resigned themselves that I'm just an addict. And so they lose a sense of purpose.
I know people hear that word and people who are in addiction, I'm always an addict, right? You hear that kind of 12-step,
Yeah.
language, but I also think you can be other things too. You can have purpose. You can have new beginnings. Your life isn't done maybe just because there's that component
Yes.
or that title or that attachment to that word, however it's looked at. But it definitely, I feel like people, I don't know if they lose hope when they get to that point, where they realize, oh my God, like I'm an addict.
Yeah.
How did you attach purpose to your life? Because we need purpose. We all need purpose.
100%. Purpose is such a major driver to be able to flourish, to be able to step into something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's an interesting mixture of extreme toxic shame, extreme loneliness, which led me to kind of an apathetic view of life, like a resignation of, I guess this is just who I am. I guess I
Mm-hmm.
was born this way. All of these lies that as I got into more of an embodied living mindset, I realized like, hey, this is actually not true at all.
Mm-hmm.
There may be things and factors that push us in a direction, but I wasn't born this way. And if that's
Mm-hmm.
true, that means I can be made into something different. I can learn to live differently, which is so hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as purpose goes, as I came out of an experience in 2022 where I went to kind of this inpatient for 2 weeks with 9 other guys I never met and
Mm-hmm.
no electronics for 2 weeks. We all lived in the same house and it was
Little
groups.
detox in multiple ways.
It was the first like 3 or 4 days, like my right leg would spasm where my phone was. And I was like, "Oh, I'm getting a text message." And I'm like, "I don't have my phone."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my muscle is spasming because I'm so used to it. But group therapy for 10 hours a day for 2 weeks straight, and we fought
Wow.
for each other's souls. And coming out of that, there was this sense of like, I am becoming different. And when I came home, I started to have these very natural conversations with guys, and I started to see that a lot of these guys were actually in a very similar spot that I was. And so I was like, huh, okay, that's interesting. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
having the same conversations with individuals or small groups of guys that don't know each other, but they're all saying relatively the same thing.
Yeah.
We have these issues as well, and we don't know what to do. And so for me, it was like, okay, well, I think I can do this. And I think I can step into this space
Mhm.
and provide some sort of a bridge for guys to come out of the shadows with addiction issues and step into the light and bring their shame and bring whatever in a
Mm-hmm.
safe place to find the beginning road of healing. So I went back and got a bunch of different certifications and started a business and have been working with guys for almost 3 years now.
Wow.
Mhm.
I love when people, because that's kind of my story, with cancer and leading me into doing trauma work. And, it sometimes, you don't want to go through the hard things in life, but the hard things, if we're open to seeing it, it's really hard to unsee. It's almost like
Mhm.
psychedelic work. Once you see it and you kind of have a clearer picture, it's really hard to go back and pretend like it doesn't exist. I don't know if that's like opening the blinders up and now you have that big panoramic view of the bigger picture. Hope comes into that. And hope is a really big thing. If I have hope that my future and my life can be better, if I have hope that I can feel better, if I have hope that I can face these things, that's a lot. And I guess through this journey, you've probably had conversations with men that maybe felt hopeless.
Many times. As we talked about a few days ago off air, guys come in typically because something has happened. There's a catalytic event
Yeah,
in their life.
usually. Yeah.
Usually, not always, but usually it's a catalytic event and a reaction to that event that they then come in and go, I need help. And some of them come in a state of shock because they're days, weeks removed from something coming out. And now all of a sudden their life will be forever different, even if there's hope. And so helping them to see like, hey, on the other side, like I am not only on the other side of the screen,
Mm-hmm.
but you seeing me means that there is hope. And I want you to know that you're going to quit before I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you choose to stop walking, I have to keep going, but I want to walk alongside with you
Yeah.
and show
Yeah.
you that there is in fact hope. Because I remember what it was like to be on the other side of the screen
Mm-hmm.
with that kind of deer in the headlights look of like, what is going to happen in my life now? And that lasted years of kind of drifting and trying to figure out like, okay, I have some form of care, but what do I do with this? And
Yeah.
how do I become a part of something greater? And so helping them to see that there is in fact another side is major. And because if they don't believe that there is actually hope, then nothing's really going to change. They
Right.
have to believe that for themselves. I can hold it for them and show them an example
Yes.
of that. But at some point they have to take that mantle and go, I believe this for myself, which is kind of a lot of the work some days when they come in and they're like, nothing's different. And for me, I'm like, well,
Yeah.
let me just go back into the notes 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Just use you a few things you said because this is very different than it was now.
Yeah.
And it's my job to help encourage you see that.
I think that's one of the most wonderful things about therapy coaching is I think sometimes people don't see their progress, but that's where our job is kind of great. I've had clients say, oh, I don't feel like I'm any different than today or don't feel any better than I did when I walked in here. And I'm like, well, let me point out a couple things. You're doing this and this and this, like therapy, coaching. We're not miracle workers. We're going to make something happen that a client isn't willing to do. And that's like the biggest thing is like the power is always within you.
Mhm.
You just have to figure out how to tap into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The ability, one of my favorite things to do is when I'm finishing up with a client who's at a spot where they're like, hey, at like, once
Like
a
an
week, once every
impasse.
2 weeks, once a month, seems like you're in a decent spot. One of my favorite things to do is I'll spend some time before like the kind of, we call it like the celebration session, the last session. And I'll
Mhm.
just go back and I'll pick some things through the notes of like, this is what you said 6 months ago. This is what you said 4 months. And they're like, I said that. I'm like, yeah. They're like, I don't think that way now. I'm like, yeah, that's
Mhm.
progress. And like, I want to send you off well so
Mhm.
that you are reminded of where you have come from,
Yeah.
because that's so important. One of the things we don't do well, at least men, we don't do super well, is we don't celebrate each other well.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like, I guess there's context too, right? I know I had Ofer in my
Mhm.
last podcast, and we talked about ways for guys to connect through sports teams. And sports don't have to be the only topic that you discuss amongst each other, but sports are a way for you guys to celebrate each other. But not all guys are in sports, right? Not all guys have ever been a part of a team. So maybe this hasn't been part of their norm. So how do you teach kind of being part of a team? How do you teach celebrating each other?
Yeah, that's where group work is so important, is you can learn in the environment when someone does something that they have been working at for weeks or months and they're like, listen, I didn't blow up on my kids. I actually sat them down and I talked with like things that like small things where it's like, hey, I actually didn't avoid this issue.
Hmm.
Talk a lot about attachment. And so for guys that have avoidant attachment where they're avoiding conflict like the plague, it's like, hey, I actually stepped into this conversation with my kids or my boss or my wife or whatever. We celebrate that. Just like, dude,
Hmm.
do you see that that's progress? Do you
Yeah.
see that 3 or 4 weeks ago, a similar scenario happened and you took off? You're like, actually, I got something to do.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. And so it's those small things in either group work or like small relational work with
Hmm.
guys in their cohort or with their friends, where to your point earlier, once you see this, you can't unsee it. Like it's
Hmm.
how I see the world now. I
Yeah.
don't
Same.
need to see it that way. It's just the filter of which I see it. So
Hmm.
helping guys to see this stuff, help their awareness to grow. And then
Hmm.
from awareness, we can start to take healthy action
Yep.
because they're already taking action. It's just in an unhealthy direction. So now that they are aware of that, how do we course correct and go? It's not just about stopping something. It's about doing something healthy instead of that. Well, now when you have awareness of that, you can move into that action. And when you take that action, if you have the right people around you, there's healthy celebration.
Hmm.
There's not this boastful, egomaniacal, I'm
Hmm.
incredible, but it's like, no, there is healthy progress and that's okay to celebrate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think, this isn't just about acknowledging the failures and talking about the negative things. I think it's also talking about the positive things. And, that negativity bias sometimes is just so strong, right? Something negative happens and we just shut down to anything positive that might be going on. But there's always good things. And even big proponent, even through being a 2-time cancer survivor, like I've been able to pull positive things from that, my life wouldn't encompass if I didn't go through those things. I don't want to go through it again.
Hmm.
But because of those things, there's been good things that have come out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember being in a 12-step meeting earlier in recovery when a guy was like, "I'm a grateful recovering sex addict," and I was like, "Excuse me?"
It's a very elaborate way to put that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, "What?" I just sat there and I like, to be like rigorously honest, I didn't believe anything he said after that because I was like, "That's not possible. How could you possibly be grateful for this thing?" And now being further on in recovery, there are things in my life now that I would not have had I not gone through what I went through,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't trade them. To your
Yeah.
point, this is kind of the both and, right? Where like I think it's called the Stockdale paradox, where soldiers in Vietnam were like had to get to the point of both and where they were like, there's a decent chance I could die today, and there's
Hmm.
still good that can happen today. And both those
Yeah.
things can be true at the same time.
Yep.
For me, it's like, I don't want to go through that ever again.
No.
And to your point, there are things in my life that I would not have, especially deep relationships, I wouldn't have without it. And so it's this kind of thing that you have to learn how to hold both of, like, especially for me, kind of allowing there to be, I would say, healthy guilt to grieve and go, yeah, like, let me stick this feeling in the ground as a signpost to go, I don't want to come back here again.
Yep. A
And then
reminder.
also not, yeah. And also not be controlled by the shame that's saying
Mhm.
you'll never change. And it's like, that's not true.
A little bit
I
of
am changing and I have changed.
Yep, a little bit of like radical acceptance. Like, okay, like I went through this, I was in that position, or I, made a choice that this was the consequence to that decision, and I own it. But
Mhm.
I'm also learning from it that I'm not going to go back there,
Yeah,
right? Like I am not going to beat myself up. It is what it is. I can't go back to the past, but learn from it, understand it. And, how has that shaped you into where you're at today? Like you wouldn't be where you're at today if you didn't face addiction.
100%. That's 100% right. Like the crazy thing for me, at least in my journey, is that recovery has made me face the parts of me that were not truly me. Like people pleasing, kind of being a chameleon, things that I learned to do because of my environment that I then became
Mhm,
responsible for as an adult. Recovery forced me to face some of those things and let go of parts and things and behaviors that are actually not really who I am.
mhm,
I learned them, but I'm actually more who I actually think I was as a kid
mhm.
than I ever have been. And so recovery is not just recovering from an addiction, it's recovering parts of myself.
Yeah, it's returning to your authentic self.
Yeah.
It's shedding that skin that you used as a maladaptive coping skill, right? To get through whatever scenarios you were faced with. Probably going back to your childhood, right?
I-
If we're being honest, we all have those things. Even I love the people that come to me and they're like, "Oh, I had the best childhood." I'm like, "Well, we're gonna see."
yeah.
There's always stuff and places for like both things to be true, right? Like your parents could have been good parents, but also have failed you in ways, right? Or not met your needs in ways that you needed your needs met, right? I mean, it's not just to dig towards, families necessarily, but there's oftentimes things that people have.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And at least for the guys that I deal with, they're really the six things that I see in almost every guy, and it varies by degree.
Okay.
There's a direct correlation between the severity of these things and the severity of their addiction. For the guys that have less of these things, their addiction is not quite as destructive. First thing is parental issues. Our stories start before we're ever born because
Yep.
our parents have stories and so on and so forth with
Yep.
theirs.
Generational trauma.
Exactly. Second thing is attachment. At the
Hmm.
end of the day, particularly with sexual addiction, it's an intimacy disorder, the ability
Hmm.
to not attach well. And there's all sorts
Hmm.
of things behind that. The third thing is shame. Those shame messages that we talked about earlier are so pervasive and they happen so young that it informs how we see people and how people see us along with attachment.
Hmm.
Fourth thing is typically trauma. And what that does in most men is it produces three things really, but two: low EQ, low emotional intelligence. And so the addiction kind of fills that gap. And then low or no brain body connection, the
Hmm.
ability to actually be in touch with their body beyond just angry, hungry, horny. That's
Yeah.
really what most guys have.
Yeah.
And then what fills the gap of all those things is the addiction. Preteen, teenage years, they find something or some things that all of a sudden they start to use and go, this makes me feel good.
Hmm. Maladaptive. Yep.
Yeah, maladaptive. It becomes the solution that later on becomes an additional problem. And that typically is because parental issues, attachment, shame, trauma are evident in the story to varying degrees, especially with attachment. There's
Hmm.
no one to
Oh
go
yeah.
to when their sexuality awakens.
Mhm.
Now they've got this napalm in their hands and no
Mhm.
one to help them see, what do I do with this?
Yeah, I think of a guy, right? I have boys. I have 10 and almost 12-year-old boys. I'm not far from those puberty years. They cringe when I say something to them. But, boys need healthy adult male figures. It's not that a mom can't be
Yeah,
supportive, right? And they say it takes one healthy adult to help with, adverse childhood experiences, but a healthy relationship with a dad, I think, is really important. Just as a healthy relationship with a supportive female is just as important
yeah.
for a young developing girl. And when there is a lack of that in a guy's life, like how do they learn that?
That's the thing, right? Like if we stop and actually take a second and think about it, most things that we learn, especially early on, are taught to us other than
Mhm.
breathing and a few bodily things.
We mimic the adults we see in our lives.
We mimic what is modeled or we fill in gaps when we don't have a model, whether it's
Mhm.
culture, people at school, where at church, other Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever. We fill in those gaps, right or wrong, and we go, well, this must be how a man or a woman operates and moves in the world.
And it can make us vulnerable too,
Mhm.
right to the wrong kind of things that could enter our life as well.
Yes, and the wrong kind of people if we're craving male
Yep.
affection.
Attention,
Yeah, and all of a sudden
attachment. Yep.
all of a sudden someone comes in who is not healthy and is actually some form of predator or whatever, we can be
Hmm.
susceptible to that because that foundation is not there.
Yep.
And so for guys, I love what you said. It's not that a healthy or not that a female figure
Nurturing mother. Right.
good. We're also looking for an example of a man to help us find out and teach us who we are and
Hmm.
help us to discover that.
Yep.
And when that's not there, we're left to kind of figure some of that on our own. And I think at least in the West, one of the other things is for women, because of the way that puberty hits them that is different than men,
Oh, yeah.
there is hey, I need to really get in touch with my body and
Hmm.
really learn my body because things are happening in a way that are
Hmm.
not happening in men.
Yeah.
And so unless someone sits us down and has a very intense or intentional conversations, really, we're just kind of like, okay, something's happening in my body, something's changing in me, and I'll figure it out. But we don't ever actually get taught how to get in touch with and understand what's going on in a
Hmm.
way that, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but in the sense of it seems like more women, it's like, I have to figure this out.
I will say there's varying degrees because I've worked with adult women who have never had the period conversation,
Mm, mm.
which is pretty traumatic
Yeah.
in itself. Lots of women who have never had sex conversations growing up, never taught about their own body or what healthy sex will look like. I
Mhm.
think there's differences. We're just told it's something you do with your husband. I've heard that too. But how do you enjoy it with your husband or your partner or
Mhm.
whatever that looks like? I think that there's gaps in both sides. I definitely see it. But then you get like two people where maybe they didn't have the education. A female meets a man who never learned kind of about his body and what healthy, attachment is. And then you stick those two people together. Because let's face it, those people have a way of finding each other.
Yes, yes. I heard it said that by a therapist that in his experience, securely attached people find securely attached people. And
We mimic what we
attached,
witness. Yep.
insecurely attached people find insecurely attached people. It doesn't mean that you can't earn secure attachment. You can.
Right.
But to your point,
Typically. Yeah.
they are drawn to each other because
Yep.
we probably grew up in an environment where we saw some version of that and not even consciously went, this must be what it some form of that needs to be like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people who create insecure, avoidant attachments, which are, really tough too. Sometimes I see those people avoid a healthy person that they would
Yes.
potentially have a good relationship with, avoid them because it doesn't come with the chaos,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes too, addiction looks like I'm addicted to that chaotic other half.
Yeah. Yeah. What do I do when it's calm? I don't know how to operate.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
nervous system actually says and is primed to go, something's wrong because it's too quiet. So how do I reorganize my nervous system and deal with my attachment issue so that I can actually potentially attach to someone healthy or create a healthy attachment with someone? And this is one of the things I was reading a couple months ago that was fascinating, was particularly for avoidant attachment. Ambivalent or anxious is a little different. Avoidant attached men are more threatened by secure attachment than the addiction. And it's like,
Because it violates everything that they believe to be true
yeah,
in a relationship.
yeah. And so, helping guys to get honest enough to go, we need to name this because this is part of what is probably going on. And it's not something to be ashamed of, but it is something to be aware of.
And understand and try to understand. Yeah.
Because if it's like, well, it's the addiction, it's the addiction, it's the addiction, it's like, well, there's truth to that. But if we
But
pull that out,
yeah.
and see the dynamic,
Yeah.
well, all of a sudden it's the vulnerability isn't just the addiction. It's the fact that it's a threat to you. Vulnerability is actually a threat to what feels like your nervous system. And we
Yep.
need to work through that and kind of reorganize and do some somatic work to go, she's not a threat. This vulnerability is not a threat. It's
Coming
actually,
within you.
and since we're typically wounded either in broken relationships or lack of relationships, healing is also very difficult to do on your own without healthy relationships to help you heal. And so
Yeah.
you can do healing one-on-one in therapy, but learning how to live new is the group dynamic, at least from what I've seen.
One of my, I don't want to say my favorite things I hear, but one of my things that I hear oftentimes from clients, and then I will challenge it,
Mhm.
is, well, I'm not ready to date because I'm not healed yet.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, I'm going to tell you right now. Again, that destination doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But also, number two, there's things you don't learn about yourself on your own that you have to learn with
Yeah.
somebody else. Like you can't practice how to be in a relationship and be single.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And I think there are levels that you can reach of healing individually.
Of course.
And to your point, you are like, I'm in a pretty good spot. And then you get into some form of relationship. And all of a sudden, things get stirred up where you're like, something must be wrong. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, actually, something might be right
Hmm.
because someone may actually be safe enough for you for certain parts to come out that actually do need to be healed. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes there is toxicity and it's like, hey, this is not healthy for sure. So
No, yeah.
that does exist. But there are other times where you're getting into a relationship and you're like, why am I being so activated right now? And it's because
Hmm.
there's a level of vulnerability that actually feels like we could get to. And boy,
Hmm.
is that terrifying.
Yeah. Well,
Because
yeah, that's the other part of it. Yes, that
what happens
vulnerability.
if I choose to be vulnerable and it's not received well? Or what happens if I choose to be vulnerable and it is received well? What do I do with that? I'm not sure what to do
Hmm.
with either of these things. I'm
Yeah.
afraid it won't be, but I don't know what to do if it is because my experience in my childhood or whatever has shown that more often than not, that's not the case. So I'm not totally sure how to respond when it is good.
Yep.
Like that's some of the things that it's interesting with guys is they start to get into this level of vulnerability with their spouse and they just don't know what to do where they're like, I like it, but I don't know how to show up in it. And it's like, that's great. That's exactly what the group work is for. We're going to practice this. We're going to work on some nervous system things and some kind of go after some shame beliefs of I don't deserve this or whatever
Yep. Yep.
so that they can show up not only well to give, which is important, but to receive, to
Hmm.
actually be able to receive love in a way that most men crave. They just don't know how to do it because they've never seen it, to your point earlier.
Yeah. Healthy attachment and healthy intimacy, when you learn to feel safe in that, when you can learn to be present in that, is just, I mean, that's like the best thing in the world. It really, really is.
It's what we're made for.
But a lot of people, and I'll admit this, there was periods of my life where I didn't understand that. It's
Mhm.
something's not going right. I'm out the door, right?
Yeah.
Like it definitely, and this is, I guess, where the midlife stuff comes in. But I say that I would love my like 20-year-old body back, but I'm not giving up the almost 48-year-old wisdom. The
Yeah.
things I've learned along the way, I wish I learned this stuff. I like praise my
Yes.
young folks when they come in because I'm like, oh, you're here in your 20s doing this.
Yes.
Be really proud of yourself for having that insight, for the fact that you have access to these tools. There's so much to be said for that.
Yeah, there is. And the hope would be that at that age, you're getting ahead of some of the carnage that could come out of not doing that.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about learning who you are in your 20s, totally. But learning some of these tools and learning some of the framework things that could help you to be more aware of certain
Hmm.
things when you're younger. Oh my gosh. So whenever younger, like 23, 24-year-old guys, I get giddy because I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, all
Yep.
right. Like, I'm so thrilled that you're here. You probably hate being here. That's okay. Like,
It's probably really uncomfortable, but know that it gets better.
it's okay. And one of my favorite things is to mix some of those guys with some of the older guys who have been in recovery for a while, who also get giddy, they're in their 50s, 60s, some of them 70s, and they see a young guy and the way, like they're encouraged, but also just the, not only recovery wisdom, but just life wisdom because they've
Hmm.
lived decades longer. The mixture is so cool if they're both open because the young guy is listening, hopefully listening and seeing this guy's got something figured out and
Hmm.
and the young guy is encouraged to go, there is hope that younger men are stepping into this at an earlier age. And I wish I was like you because I was 50 years old when I stepped in.
Yeah. 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 It's definitely, we didn't have this stuff, in your mid 30s, right? So your generation was starting to kind of get a little bit more of this, but like my kids are learning social emotional things in school. They have social workers. They've had therapy,
Yeah.
in my childhood, if you had a therapist, something really bad happened to you and you did not talk about it. You didn't share it openly.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting. I think it was 2 Christmases ago, hanging out with my family. And there's been a lot of recovery's given me a lot of gifts. And one of them has been the ability to have really hard conversations with members of my family, both
Hmm.
in kind of asking for forgiveness and going, hey, I I missed it big
Hmm.
here. And then also receiving some as well, or asking for some and receiving. So there's been a lot of restoration, which is not always common, and I'm thankful for it. I
Yeah.
remember sitting with my mom as we were kind of talking about therapy, and we were watching the Christmas movie, The Santa Claus.
Okay.
And so Tim Allen is making fun of the character's name is Neil, and he's a psychiatrist. And the movie, the way it's framed, was like Tim Allen thinks he's a joke. My mom was like, this is what the environment was like for me when I grew up, that if you went to therapy, this is what it was like.
Yeah.
Because that's not my experience, there's been much more openness. I'm like, that's really interesting to know. To your
Yeah.
of like, there was a stigma or there was just something
Hmm.
be really wrong with you if you're going to therapy. And
Yep.
seeing that even in the movies, I was like, this is fascinating to watch.
Yeah, there's a movie, this was more my youth growing up, but What About Bob?
Oh yeah, yep.
It's a great one, you know. He was definitely a little bit unhinged, but those are the things you thought about, right? You thought about these people who were, really struggling in life. And the reality is that everybody struggles at one point or another. And I'm somebody who, yes, I have the ability to diagnose, but I do think most diagnoses come from attachment trauma, in my opinion. Are there certain characteristics? And are there more severe things? Of course. But addiction too, that's another thing, right? What changes our chemistry, right? Our brain chemistry. I do a psychedelic work, and we're very much about, it's almost kind of like reprogramming the brain a little bit. We're building new
Okay.
neuron growth by doing specifically ketamine in New York State. But there's other psychedelic work that's going on in other places, whether it's a clinical trial or someone's going to Mexico or Costa Rica. There's a really fascinating, a colleague had recommended this documentary of Waves in War. I don't know if you've watched that, but it's tremendous. It's on Netflix, and it's about military Navy SEAL veterans who are retiring and kind of what that looks like acclimating back into family life and being a dad or a husband and the struggles associated, right? They do a really good job of creating these machines, so to speak, but they don't do a great job of undoing all the trauma associated. I really feel for these people. I know I've kind of had I don't know if you've got my episode with first responders, whether it's dispatch, EMT, fire, not just law enforcement, but all encompassing. When we look at these populations, and a lot of them are men, right? The majority are men statistically, a lot of trauma there.
100%. And I want to think about this just for a second.
Yeah.
I grew up with a guy who was in a branch of the military at a very high level, extremely high level. And coming home and being a dad to multiple kids was and being a good husband was and is an incredible adjustment to
Yeah.
your Pacific Northwest has done, they were, I think at least in America, they were some of the leading ones on using psychedelics for PTSD and things like that for the rest of the country, and showing how it can actually help the brain to rewire, process, go some stuff. The ability for us to let that stuff go, whatever the field. And one of the guys I do recovery with closely is a retired lieutenant, fire department. And same thing.
Yeah.
He's like, trauma to me was seeing horrific things on my job.
Yeah.
Trauma was not my childhood. I had to shift kind of how I saw that, because I was like, I didn't have any trauma. What are you talking about? I see trauma every day at work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of your classic first responder, law enforcement, EMT model.
Veteran. Yep.
Yeah, veteran model, until you get into their story and you're like, brother, like.
Yeah, I love when I do EMDR, because I do EMDR work, and I get into EMDR. I'm also trained in progressive counting. We get that worst list going, and they're rating things because you give it your subjective units of distress score. And we'll be like, okay, we're at this memory. We're going to process this today. Are you comfortable with this? Yeah, but I don't know that I need to. And I'm like, well, I think it's worth processing, and let's just see how it goes. And we get into it, and they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah. I've done this work myself. I get it. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
I have I have a specific guy who I'm thinking of a very specific memory. He's like, hey, I'm not sure if this is something. And he goes on to share a very horrific memory of abuse. And I'm like, yeah, that's something. Like we're gonna talk, we're gonna do some story work around that. And he's like, all right, I guess. And then like I have him kind of had this template where we kind of walk through it. And as he pulls it out I was like, so how was this for you? He was like, this was a lot harder than I was anticipating. I was like, yeah.
Because you've compartmentalized for so long and you've kind of lost, I don't want to say the pathway to it because, right, the body keeps the score, so to speak. So it's still there. But if you kind of dissociate your way through it a little bit or disconnect, whatever choice of language a person likes to use, you don't realize how it's impacting you. So doing that deeper trauma work helps you connect kind of like, okay, now I'm seeing almost like this branch system or,
Yes.
root system, however you want to look at it, connecting all these things. And you are the beginning of that.
Yeah.
Right? It's still a part of you, even though you're not acknowledging it. It's definitely there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And one of my favorite things to do with guys as we get into some of the story work is to just have them do an exercise just called the mirror exercise, where I'm like, I want you to set a timer, stare at yourself for 60 seconds in the mirror. Don't brush your teeth. No utility, no combing your hair, no nothing.
Just as you are.
And just write down what you see.
Okay. I love it.
And we'll talk about it. And it horrifies the guys.
People struggle with that. Yeah.
They just, and what ends up happening is they typically come back with some really painful messages. And I'm like, this was you slowing down for 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, imagine what would happen if we actually had this awareness progressively over the next 4 or 5 months. It's something I like to do at the beginning to just help them kind of get some, like really help them see this is how you see yourself. It's right there under the surface, but we disconnect or we dissociate or we escape or fantasize or whatever. Don't have the tools to process what we have done, what has happened to us, or typically both. So I like to kind of do that periodically because it also shows like, hey, remember this message back here that you're ultra successful on the surface, but you believe that you were a boy, not a man? Well, now you're saying this over here, like, and reflecting back growth to them. I love to do that. So it's cool.
Yeah, it's a great exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, if we don't have a healthy internal dialogue, it is going to have a ripple effect. It's going to emerge out. We talked about kind of like finding that unhealthy opposite person that kind of matches us where we're at. And, I will see this sometimes. And this doesn't mean everybody in a relationship going through therapy is going to get divorced. I do not mean that at all. But sometimes, you start to work on things or a person starts to work on things and, they grow and sometimes a partner doesn't grow with them. So a lot of times I will say, okay, I've got a list here of some providers I can refer your partner to because they got some things they need to work on too. We all have stuff, like nobody's immune. So I will see that oftentimes. And some couples do. They do the work and they're good and they come out stronger than ever. But I feel like when you go through and do this work, it's almost like you have to get to know each other again from that different perspective of who you are now presently.
Yes, 100%. And I'm so glad you said what you said a few seconds ago, because I feel like it's not talked about enough, which is when you get into healing, recovery, whatever like that, there can be a different type of loneliness that creeps up because the dysfunction, albeit dysfunction, we at least know how to
familiar. Yep.
We know how to operate in it. When that pattern disrupts, when the record skips or stops playing, now we're forming a new path. And so even though the rhythm is dysfunctional, it's still going in a certain direction. And when you break that and start to go in a different direction, now everything is shifting.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that everything will be okay relationally. It can be really tough. Because someone's pursuing health and the other person may be like, hey, that's good for you. Or they may be
functioning in the chaos still.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Or the other person's like, I don't want to be with you anymore because they themselves don't want to get help. And that's just kind of this, I'm so glad you said it because it's something that
I see it a lot.
Yeah. And I feel like it's not talked about a ton where I'm like, hey, and I'm thankful early on in recovery, my first coach/counselor said like, hey, now that you're in this world, especially as a guy, there's going to be a different type of loneliness that you're going to feel because you're going to want to dive into levels that a lot of guys aren't ready for. And I was like, nah.
You got to inch your way in. You got to get them prepared for it.
Yeah. And I came home and I was telling all these guys what I learned and they were happy for me. They were not interested in walking into that depth. I had to adjust because I was like, he was right. And you scale that type of feeling into a relationship where the dysfunction breaks and now someone's going in the direction of health. That takes a lot of courage for the person to continue that work because it's unfamiliar. They don't necessarily know where they're going and they're leaving, even though it's dysfunction, they're leaving the familiar behind. And that can be really hard.
Yeah, it can be really isolating. I'm divorced myself and I went from being with my kids all the time to having them 50% of the time. And I will say that that initial quiet on my own was, I always tell people like that was the isolation and the loneliness that hits you like a tidal wave when you're not used to that. Like you just want 5 minutes to yourself, but then you get all this time to yourself and it's like, oh, damn, like what am I doing with that? But what I have found was through those quiet moments and actually sitting with myself and being with myself is where I've found myself returning to hobbies,
Mhm.
learning a new skill set. I've been able to consistently exercise for many years now.
Yeah.
I will go on long walks and I will listen to a podcast or an audiobook
Mhm.
or find time just enjoying a show on my own. Like I believe that learning to be alone with yourself is truly a superpower.
Mhm.
And if you can master that, and it's balanced too. I don't think a person should be alone all the time. But sometimes on a Friday, I'm not going to make plans. If I have an evening off and, maybe I have some things I want to do. And learning to get comfortable alone also in that quiet time
Yeah.
outside the chaos.
Yes. And this, at least on my side with guys, is one of the hardest things for them
Yeah.
because they then have to sit with themselves in solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between solitude and isolation for
Yes.
sure. And solitude is healthy. Too much isolation is not. I totally agree. But
Yep.
they have to then learn how to sit with themselves and go, okay, maybe I do need to sit with some of these hard questions and not distract myself or not always choose connection, which can be a distraction from some
Oh
really,
God, with the apps, with the dating apps, someone's always a swipe away.
that's a whole nother thing of like, what does healthy connection look like
Yes.
compared to, for me back in the day, using people to numb my
Mm-hmm.
loneliness. Like I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going to name it and I'm not proud of
Yeah.
it, but I'm not going to hide from it.
But you owning it allows you to kind of harness it and learn from it, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys and there's a lot of women too. I mean, this goes on both sides. I hear both sides of it. It's rough out there. Dating is a rough world, right? With the internet, with AI, with porn, all of it.
Yep.
There's people's version of what they think attachment actually is literally a click away.
Yes. Yes, that's right. And the ability to, I love what you said, harness aloneness as a superpower. It's something that like being more of an anxious attachment style, like the question, as I boil it all down, the question that I realized that I was asking from a very, very young age is, are you going to be there?
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't
Yep.
sure. And
Yeah.
so that anxiety can show up in a relational way. So the
Absolutely.
ability for me to learn and continue to learn how to be alone well, how to sit with the anxiety and go, I just need to sit with it for now. It's fine. Or go, I'm going to call a brother. I'm going to call someone and connect because
Yeah.
it doesn't mean I have to have an unhealthy outlet.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for connection right now. And if I call one of the guys in recovery, we always have great conversations and I'm going to feel seen and known and they're going to feel seen and known. It's going to be good. But the ability to sit with that aloneness and actually listen to what is it trying to tell me? Is there an area I have to work on? Or is it just I'm misconnecting with someone? That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a normal human emotion and emotions come and go. When people come to me and they're like, I just want to be happy. And I'm like, well, that's this fake thing we learn to believe is again like a destination. Happiness comes and goes.
Yeah.
I think what you mean is you're looking to be at peace or to find a calm state that you can kind of learn to function in that window of tolerance and manage your day to day and the ups and downs and still kind of remain calm in there. But happiness comes and goes, right? Just like anger, just like sadness. And it's learning to be fluid in those various emotions. I will give out sensation lists. I will give out feeling lists. And some of my clients are
Feelings
like,
good.
oh, what am I doing with this? And I'm like, you'd be surprised at how useful this is because
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't have the language
Yeah.
necessarily on how to describe what it is that you're feeling and where you're feeling it. And how do you know that you're feeling it?
Yes. And that's one of the things that I work with guys on is like the 3-2-1. And so 3 feelings, 2 sensations, and 1 negative cognition or like shame message.
Okay.
And start tracking that because
Yeah.
we want to see what is it like to be you on the daily
Mm-hmm.
so that you can start to go, well, for the past 6 days, I wrote down anxiety or I wrote down anger and I feel anger in my arms or in my chest or like now all of a sudden you can start to go, well, I'm not totally sure what I'm feeling as an emotion, but my body feels really tense. Now we can start to body map and go, that the more data you have, the more you can start to take back control in a healthy way and start to choose healthy things. But as long as your body's a mystery, you're always going to be in reactive mode versus actually being proactive.
Because it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah. And you're going to look for something or someone to distract you from the discomfort if you don't know how to name it or how to work with it and move through it instead of avoiding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How does this then, because I think this is important to talk about, and I find myself, I wasn't somebody who was raised religious, but I definitely am spiritual. You know, there's something. I don't know personally what it is, but what does that look like for you? Because for some people, they hear that and they're just like, oh, well, I'm not religious. And it's like, well, it doesn't mean you have to be religious. If you are, that is fine. But you know, how does your spirituality tie into this?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So me personally, I would subscribe more into the realm of Christian faith. All that plays itself out is I do believe there is something or someone greater.
Yeah.
And for me, in the beginning of each day, I have a time of meditation and prayer to get myself outside of myself.
Okay.
Because that is helpful for me to go, okay, well, if there is something or someone greater than myself and there is a way to connect, I would like to do that because I tried doing everything my way and it didn't work super great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I'm an awful person, but it does mean that I want to get outside of myself and continue to learn. And so for the guys that I work with as well, not all of them, but a lot of them are spiritual or in the Christian realm. So we kind of build in the reality of like, okay, well, what is the shame messages or what are the shame messages telling you? Because I do think that a level of guilt is good. It means we're not a sociopath. Toxic shame is unhealthy and it's a lie. And so we want to pull that out and go, what is true? What is true about who you are becoming?
Yeah.
In the Christian faith, who does God say that you are? And how do we build a healthy foundation so that that is something that you can stand on? So to your point, emotions come and go. They're great followers, not super great leaders sometimes. How do we stand on something that doesn't change in an unhealthy way and stays the same in a healthy way so that when things are shaking up here underneath or what we built on it will stand?
Yeah.
So practically spirituality looks like meditation, prayer, different readings. For me, it's scripture. For other people, it's other things. To kind of ground and center myself into something or someone greater than me. Because I know that I am finite. And I know that I can't run the world.
Yeah.
Barely, I don't mean it's in a unhealthy way, but like I'm continuously learning how to manage my own life.
Yeah. I get it. I get it.
And so helping guys really in a holistic way focus on the physical of going, let's learn your body. Mental, what are those shame messages and the unhealthy things going on in there? And also helping them to know how the brain works with neuroplasticity and things like that.
Yeah.
EQ, the emotional, bring their inner world out in a way that is healthy and helpful with other men and in healthy ways. And then the spiritual, building a solid spiritual foundation for them to stand on so that in recovery, something new can be built.
And does your spirituality or spirituality of those that you work with encompass nature? Because nature is, in my opinion, nature is spiritual.
Yeah.
The cosmos, everything.
So, for me, it does. I say big. We're in Buffalo. You get 10 good weeks out of the year to really be out and it's tough. But
you pick up a winter sport. That's what you do.
You do. Yes. Yes, that's right. The ability to be outside. Even at least for me, even in the Christian faith, the reality of like connecting to the earth, it's like the energy in the sense of like when
grounding,
I put
take your shoe. Yeah. Yep.
My bare feet on the grass, there is an actual current coming from the earth, and it actually puts me in a better mood. Like that's scientifically proven. So
I see myself and I see clients like the sun comes out and I'm like, I sit up a little taller. I feel a little perkier in my personality. Like,
Yeah. For anybody who's listening to this, who's not in the Buffalo area, Buffalo and Seattle will switch spots for least amount of sunlight days in America. Yeah. And why that's important is because seasonal affective disorder. On last Monday, I woke up and I went to my balcony and I looked outside and I literally yelled, "Where is the sun?" Because it hadn't been out in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
It does affect for sure. Like I'm a very different person in July than I am in February because I'm fully awake and alive coming out of hibernation mode because the sun's out. And so, including nature and healthy grandiose in the sense of not you, but get into an environment where you become speechless. Get
Mm-hmm.
into an environment where you are around something that is going, I don't even know how to describe, and it gets you outside of yourself to go,
Mm-hmm.
this is, and that then typically what it produces is wonder, which is healthy, awe, and gratitude. They're all three very important things to have in recovery. When shame spikes, we choose gratitude. When we can see a sense of wonder, we can also be open to a sense of purpose, something bigger than ourselves again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm all about getting guys connected into nature and something bigger than themselves in a way that is experiential, not just
Mm-hmm.
philosophical and intellectual, because
Mm-hmm.
guys will use their heads to hide their hearts.
Yep.
And
Yep.
they're sneaky about that. And I was one of those guys.
Okay.
So now it's about like, no, I want to engage the senses. I want you to
Mm-hmm.
embody like living in recovery. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
about information. Because if it was just about information, why are we even talking? I can give you
Yeah.
a sheet and you can go figure it
Right.
out. Embodied living and engaging all those areas.
I think that's important, all those different aspects. It really is. I had a question. I know you mentioned doing group work. If a guy was looking to work with you and do group work, like what does that look like? How does he sign up? How does he get on board? Because I can think of guys that I definitely could be sending your way.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
They could just email me. By my coaching business is called Wayward Coaching because I was a
Okay.
wayward soul and I love that word.
Okay.
And so Mike at wayward-coaching.com. You
Okay.
can shoot me an email.
Okay.
We're also in the midst
Announcement of something in the works.
the growing, the stretching of stepping into more, launching an online platform called Men Worth Following. The whole point is like being someone who's worth following, someone who loves their spouse well, who loves their kids well. If they're an employer, they treat their employees well and fairly. They care about injustice. They care about making the world a better place. And we're in the middle of finishing up, putting together a pretty in-depth assessment about those 6 things: parental issues, attachment, shame, trauma, low EQ, and low to no brain-body connection. And
Okay.
again, as of now, I'm working on it, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
certified in EMDR brain spotting.
Mm-hmm.
So if they score a certain level, we want to work with them and also help them find healthy care to go,
Yep.
I'm not qualified. Let's get you the right care. But for the guys that maybe haven't had the stuff that would qualify them to need some of that, we're putting together a program of group work to get guys in the group to learn about attachment, these other things, and
Good.
really come up with some NLP, like neuro-linguistic programming, some drills to help them practice in a group and then go and take and try that at home.
Yeah.
Again, creating a space for guys to fail safely and fail forward, to fall
Yep.
forward, not fall back.
Yeah.
So to your original question, Mike at wayward-coaching.com, wayward-coaching.com. If they're interested, if they're just looking for more information, and then the online platform, I'm excited about that because that's where a lot of this group work is going to take shape. We're doing some of it now,
Yeah.
but a lot of that's going to take shape. And one of the benefits of coaching, there's pros and cons to both therapy and coaching, is that
Mhm.
the certification that I have allows me to cross state lines for now.
Okay.
So for guys that are not necessarily in New York, if you hear this, like I can work with you as well.
Yeah, which is great. I always love to have resources of like, okay, we're doing therapy together and we're working, say, on EMDR, but you could also benefit from linking with group work and developing some of these social skills. Because I see that too,
Yes.
and again, you could be working on attachment and those other things as well and kind of practicing that in the group setting for sure. But I think there is a need for more group work and connection for men.
Yes.
And I feel like COVID, Meetup was a place. I know I feel like it's kind of making a way back, but it was a kind of like a go-to referral source for me where I would send people to look for different things. Do you do any weekend retreats or hiking or anything like that? Or is that on the horizon? Because I feel like you would be really great at this.
Yes. So it's on the horizon. I do contract with an organization where I will fly down and do a 3-day intensive.
Okay.
With 10 to 15 guys. So it's
Okay.
me and a couple other guys. And so we'll have larger group teaching time on some of the stuff we talked about today. And then in the small groups is where we run through kind of the story work model of like, where are you? How did you get here? Where do you need to go? In a very compressed and intense time. I am working on doing that on my own. That to me is my favorite.
So it's like your ultimate goal, like where you're headed with all this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that to me is where I love, like that is where I come alive. Is that short condensed time where it's like, let's go. Let's
Yeah.
get after it.
And you know what? I've been doing this for a long time. I mean, I feel like this is your calling. Like, I feel like
Mm,
you're really good at this.
Thank you.
And I feel like you're very passionate about
Mhm.
this. And I see you taking the work that you do. You're not just taking this lightly.
No.
This is important to you. And I feel that.
Yeah. I mean, as you've talked about as well, like this, this has become an extension of myself. And it's not like, this is not all of me. And I
Mhm.
think that's
Yeah.
important.
No, but it's a
Um,
layer
but it's
for
a
sure.
layer of me that I love. And I'm thankful, one of the things I heard a couple days ago was like, what a privilege it is to be tired over the things that you dreamed about. Like, you know what? This is good today because I'm frustrated about this, this, and this. And that's a really
What?
big boost
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, kind of. And that's kind of where I am is I'm like, there's a lot of gratitude. I'm thankful, um, thankful to God that I'm at a spot where I prayed to be years ago.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
yeah,
And you're doing it. You're making it happen. And I think that's something to be said for people's dreams, for hope, for not giving up,
yeah,
for believing in yourself,
mhm,
because I think there's a layer of that
yeah,
and continuing to do this great work.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, this has been wonderful. And I
Mm,
feel like this has been a great episode.
yeah,
I feel like so many people are going to get benefit from listening to you have this conversation with me today. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate your time.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for your story. I love it when people ask great questions because it makes me think and go, that's real. So thank you for holding space well and just for doing what you're doing. It's great.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. And I feel like this is, I don't know if team effort is the word I'm looking for, but conjoint effort of those in the community to help other people. And I think that there's a ripple effect when we help each
Yeah.
other. Our community is going to feel that, and it's making the world a better place. And that's the whole point of doing this. I got to midlife and I was disgusted by the things I see online, and I'm like, I just want to do something good. And what is that going to look like? How do I reach more people? And that's where this was born.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
So
I'm glad you're doing it.
thank you. Thank you for joining me for today's conversation on the Unapologetic MidLife Podcast. If this episode spoke to you, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps others find this space of honesty, hope, and reinvention. The Unapologetic Midlife Podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical, mental health, or professional advice. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapeutic relationship with Mindi Lobuzzetta, LMHC. Always consult with a qualified healthcare or mental health professional regarding your individual needs. If you are experiencing a crisis, call 911 or dial 988 for the Suicide Crisis Lifeline. Hope to see you soon.